the bonus session here. Tom, anything you have before you jump off?
Well, I got a few more minutes.
Okay. So this is what gets into the next level here. This is where it breaks it down into internalization, internalizing questions and awakening, internalizing listening, our why, and then dimensional thinking, discovery learning, and then engineered clarity. And then questions for information, questions for action, our why, questions to solve failure, and then questions to achieve life vision. And then heard the words you said, feel the feelings and the meaning, sense the failure, and then awakened for the life vision. And so it goes deeper into all of these things. So there's a whole layer underneath this that's really, really cool. Ski, thoughts, questions, insights you have?
This was a powerful session. This really was. I have to say there was something very subtle that I took out of this early on when you were talking about the question that to be asked, and asking the question, are you seeking clarity in any area of your life? I think that is huge. That's not something that we've talked about in the past, but I think it is really an excellent question. Asking the biggest challenge and what you'd like help with, I think, is important. But making people ask themselves about clarity, I think, is really huge.
See, and I think, Ski, that most people are not ready for that question.
I agree.
Because I think most people will say, oh, I want clarity on this, and they don't understand, like the depth that resonated with you, the frequency, it's like a dog whistle, and it resonated with you. So how do we help people check themselves? Like when we say, is there anything you're looking for in clarity in your life? And if somebody says no, okay, that's probably not.
Is the question asking them?
You're a little distant.
Oh, sorry, I'm better. Can you hear me okay now?
It's a little better.
Better? My question, or what I'm saying is maybe the next question is, do you know what clarity is? And asking them to think about that.
See, I think that's a great question. I don't think, and if you don't understand dimensional thinking, then you don't understand that life is all about clarity, and the more clear you get on things, the more unclear you are, I think. Mm-hmm. Nicole, thoughts, insights you would have?
Yeah, the 4 levels of internalization. When you
Sorry, you're a little light too.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
With the 4 levels of internalization, we talk, how do you know if you have a blind spot in yours? When you get down to making sacrifices or anything like that, what if can you explain that? What if you have a blind spot?
Right, by the very thing of blind spot, if we think so what I'm doing, Nicole, is I've asked, I think it's about 15 people now, what they think my blind spots are. And not one of them have come up with the same thing. It's intriguing. So I'm starting to actually ask that question of everybody I know.
What are you getting back?
Oh, I mean, I've got one that said, one individual said to me, they're like, are you going to use it against me? I'm like, I don't know how to respond to that. And then they said, I don't like the way you present things. Then somebody else said, I think you're too nice on people. I had somebody say, I think you're too caring to people. I've had people say that I talk too much. I've had people say, Like I'm actually building a system. There'll be a spreadsheet that I'm putting together for it where I'm digging in. I had somebody said that they thought I was working my life vision rather than having God work it. So a whole wide range. So I'm writing them all down, and I'm putting them all into a spreadsheet. Somebody else said that they thought I was arrogant. Somebody else said that I didn't have grace and mercy and patience. So a whole bunch
Isn't
of
that
stuff.
just their interpretation of whatever they're interacting with you about?
So Tom,
Because you're probably all of those things at some point.
So do people do that a lot to you, Tom? What I mean is, do they project themselves onto you a lot?
Yeah, I think so.
See, I wonder, when you look at the model, like this is something I've been thinking about quite a bit lately on the true intentions. So you go into here. Sorry, getting it up on the screen. Okay, so go into here. So the purification. I wonder if the more pure somebody's hearts is, the more pure somebody's motives are, the greater the mirror you are to other people, and people project themselves onto you. They see themselves more clearly in you, and so everything that they're saying about you is actually true about themselves, but they don't realize that.
Well, it goes back to what we talked about at one point about I can't give you anything I don't have. So when they're thinking that process, they have to be thinking that about themselves.
So here's a question, Tom. Like, how do you help people see that?
See what I just said?
Yeah, that it's a reflection of themselves rather than what they're seeing in you.
I mean, the simplest way I've ever explained what I just said is, what would you have to have if you wanted to give me 5 apples? You would have to have the 5 apples. And so that you can't give me anything unless you have it for yourself.
Oh, another one somebody said is they thought I was smarter than everybody else. And I wanted
Which
to
basically says you're smarter than them.
Which, and then somebody said they thought I was smarter than God.
Well, that's an interesting one.
So, Nicole, I've made a rule that I won't defend it, won't say anything other than tell me more.
Okay.
Questions?
I'm thinking.
While you're thinking. Peter, I know you got to run here. Anything you have, any thoughts you have before you?
No, I scribbled down all my bullet points.
Yeah, the stuff, like, I'm really excited to see, where all of this goes. Like, all of this came out of Leverage. Like, the entire model of engineered clarity. And so in purification, being aware of selfless, selfish, that we're all selfish, understanding spectrums and levels, awareness of our weaknesses, and then awakening to everyone's true intentions.
Yeah, look, there's a gulf between, I mean, I put it into corporate terms sometimes, I guess, between a dream, vision, strategy, plan, because at one end of the spectrum is unpredictable, unknown, adventure. It's the gap between the predictable, the plan, right? So whether you look at that personally or professionally, recognizing or actually going through the process of dreaming, you know, in other words, what is your why? You know, the big thing why that you're searching for, and what have you accumulated in baggage and habits thus far, which is the predictable. So that gap between the two, you have to have a way of bridging it, right, in order to connect the dream or the life dream or whatever it may be for a business or an individual to what you're actually doing. And that's where all the elements that you've been covering kind of fit in, because it requires that discipline of self-reflection. You have to be productive, and that needs to be predictable. So a certain amount of time needs to be spent on the predictable. The older you get, the more habits you put in the bag, good, bad, or indifferent. So life can become more predictable, but more constraining for a business, for an individual. So, you know, that back to that dimensional thinking, back to the dream, you have to build that in and make it a habit to get the balance between the predictable and the unknown, right? So in a business, you need to deliver results. But if you kept spending all your time on the plan and less on, you know, vision and strategy, the unpredictable, the unknown, that's where change takes place. So the formula, I think, that you're laying out has all the right elements in it. So in that sense, you know, it's a fascinating reconciliation of how you change your habits, the ones that have got you this far in life that you probably are doing too much of if you're 20, 30, or 30, 40, 50 years old, and the new ones you need to learn to grow.
Huh.
So, yeah, I think it's fascinating.
Murray, any thoughts you have? Any other thoughts, Peter or Tom? Any other thoughts either of you have?
It's just been I think when you started out, you said it was going to be a ride. I think it has absolutely turned into that.
How this connects into trust the integrity of the system, Tom, like that, it just enriched that, you know, awakened it, enlightened. Like, when should you trust the integrity of the system and when shouldn't you entrust the integrity of the system? Like, all of those things. Like, Peter, the stuff you have, like, I want to see a model. Like, I want to, like, it's like, okay, so dream, strategy, vision, and plan, some structured, some not structured. You know, recognize, rationalize, realize, internalize, believe, behavior, outcome. Like, how do we condense all of those things in? How do we incorporate those things into the model? How do we help people to see more clearly, faster, you know, what's going on? I mean, it's just...
Well, when I looked at your model on last week's call, you know, I was looking for the path, right, the stair step. But I realized if you can put your bullseye back up on the screen, that's actually a spiral down or out, right? And I was, so in other words, you know, the layers on that onion, so to speak, of result in the middle, sorry, calls jumping in, it's actually a spiral of all these different lessons that you're covering. And the thing that struck me was that, you know, there's not necessarily an order for all those things as you go out. But that each one has there's a lot of detail in each one. Listen to these things do. Awakening, purification, clarification, internalization, and whether there was a way of actually turning that bullseye into a spiral that kind of grows and overlaps, but there is an order to it, and a lesson that you can drill into on each one of those things. Because each one is is a significant, not discussion, but lesson that you need to understand the elements and turn them into habits. You know, there's a lot.
Well, and that's where at the very end that we didn't get to in the lesson, that's where each of these down here is what was trying to be portrayed here, is the onions, the dimensions. It's one of the concepts that people seem to really struggle with, is they don't understand dimensions. And so if you don't understand dimensions, that once you hit a 10, 10 is not perfection. 10 is masteries, and there's a difference between masteries and perfection. And so with masteries, you move to a new dimension, which means a 2 in the next dimension's higher than a 9 in the previous dimension. And so because people don't understand dimensions, what they do is they level off in life. They become satisfied. Or they become arrogant. Like, I'm really smart. Well, okay, you're really smart in your dimension. You're really smart in the peers that you're around. But in a bigger dimension, in the next dimension, you're not that smart. So there's so much more work. I mean, like, there's 70 hours plus that went into this, and I need to put another 700 hours in. Tom or Peter, are either of you familiar at all with quantum physics, quantum mechanics, quantum computing?
It's a fascinating topic to me. I can't say I fully understand it, but yes.
I'm with Peter.
So I'm thinking quantum thinking. Like, it's always intriguing to me when people say, Mark, I know what you're thinking, or Mark, you would think this, or Mark, you would say this. It always intrigues me. Like, I'm only thinking one thing. You think I think only one thing at a time? Like, the brain was not created. Like, when I asked the physics professor, I said, I'm curious about physics. I've had this question. Maybe you know it. What's faster, the speed of light or the speed of thought? He looked at me. He's like, what? I'm like, yeah, that's a question I've had. What's faster, the speed of light, because that's the fastest thing we know, or the speed of thought? He's like, I've never been asked that question. I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm curious. He's like, you'd have to talk to a brain surgeon, like somebody who specializes in brain. So I think that, like, the brain is the ultimate quantum. The brain doesn't. People think linear, but they have the ability to think in quantum, which is multi-dimensional. It's like light has a start and end, and then it has a destined journey. But in quantum thinking, in quantum speed, it's like it's faster than light because it's not measuring distance or speed as we measure it, because you can actually do gap jumping. You can jump gaps. And so these are the things I think that, like, when people talk about, like, my background is very strong Christian and stuff. And when people think about, when Christians talk about evolution not being true and all this stuff, they're in a losing battle with the world. But when you say, well, if you're not created special, you're not going to internalize things. If you just evolve from nothing, well, then you're just a little bit better than something else, and so you're not spectacular. And so if people don't recognize that they were engineered, I believe, if they don't recognize they were created, like these screenshots will never evolve. They'll never just happen. They had to have a creator. Like, there's no amount of evolution that would go ahead and just make these slides appear on the screen. There was a Frank Forte. I want to get him on. I want to get Mike Radford on. There's 2 or 3 people that if we get them involved in this thing, I'm telling you, it's crazy. And Frank Forte, he's the one that programmed, nuclear missiles on a sub. Super smart guy. Like, this guy is unbelievable. He understands quantum thinking. Like, whoa, that's really cool. And so it's like a different way of thinking. So if you weren't created and crafted in your mother's womb to be something really special, it's going to be hard for you to understand your significance in life. And you are really, really significant. Like, unbelievably significant. Like, hello, like, this is so cool. And if we don't help the next generation or the next 2 or 3 generations, if we don't help them recognize how significant they are, they're not going to internalize things. They're going to be seduced like the masses into slavery. I don't know. Awesome. Anything else? Go ahead.
No, just on that, I think the fact of the matter is, in that regard, we get in our own way with the use of our brains, right? I mean, we get in our own way in terms of what anything living is made up of. And this is, I guess, for the quantum physics, so I'm not speaking with knowledge, but everything's made up of atoms and nuclei and everything that's living in the universe. So the speed at which you think or your brain can think, it depends whether it's how you react to an environment, because your body can become anxious in a nanosecond if there's something you react to. So but that's a subconscious reaction. Our conscious behavior is much slower, right? And that's the difference between, people that react consciously are basing all of their reaction, their thoughts on things that have happened before. It's a more rational side. So, if you're running an operation, most of your thinking in a business is based on rational, right? Things that are predictable. And that's a slower process of thought than imagining where you want to get to. So, the speed at which some people can grow and produce is far greater than others because of their ability to think in the unknown, right, and reconcile it with the predictable. How do you produce what you dreamt you could produce? And you can take that from a Nikola Tesla or even Tesla cars today, different company. So the speed at which things can happen for some individuals or some organizations is all based on how much time they spend rationally behaving on all the things that have occurred in their past. So that's a slower moving model. And that's why, at some point when you often said sea-level guys, white males 50 years and older, I don't think it's unique to that category particularly, but as we get older, we learn that life is more predictable based on habits that we've learned on things that we've done before. And it gets harder and harder to the discipline or having a system or a process that keeps the balance between growing in the unknown and living in the predictable, right?
Wow.
One's adventurous, one makes you feel comfortable because you know the outcome. It's the same as you did yesterday and the week before and the month before. And that, in a business situation, that's where businesses die. They've been around for a long time in some instances because they keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result in a changing environment. Ain't going to happen. So
yeah, you and I should talk sometime, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that, maybe Tom and I should talk, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that interconnects into this, and it's like, I don't know, it's just really exciting. Like, it's like I'm looking for something for my grandkids that's going to help them to make a generational gap, a jump. They're going to jump things. They're going to see things that, others don't see. And I feel like I can feel the energy in what you were saying and what Tom was saying, what others were sharing. It's like, and how do you capture that? How do you help people to see that? So, again, go ahead.
Sorry, just one thing. People need to know they're safe, right? It's like, do you drive a car down the road at a safe speed and get somewhere slower, or do you feel it's safe to drive fast? And, kids are so often told, you have to behave this way or do things this way or learn this way. It's unsafe or unpredictable if you go outside these boundaries. And the best thing you can do for kids, in my book, is teach them that there are no boundaries. I'm not talking about, violence, but they have to know that there's no boundaries. And so much of what we teach at school is all about boundaries and the way you have to learn. And that slows everybody down.
See, and this is where, my brain is just, I think the thing that, like, in looking at, like, boundaries are put there for our own protection so we don't hurt ourselves or kill ourselves.
Or businesses, yeah.
Yeah, but then you're right that those boundaries, like, they're not movable. Like, so I remember when...
They're limited.
Yeah, they're limiting us. And so they were there to prevent us from dying, but now we're stuck with them. I remember when my, 6-year-old grandson was 4 years old, and I drove he and his mom and his brother back to Philadelphia. And, we were at a rest stop, and at 4 years old, this kid, he knew no boundaries. I knew that I could not take my eyes off of him literally for 3 seconds, because if I did, he could get run over by a truck. I mean, this kid he was so fast, and he was so curious and so out of control, and I'm like, man, am I glad I'm a young grandfather. But, so it's like in this dimension, you've got to, where you're at in this dimension, you've got to have boundaries. Those boundaries will come over time. I mean, one of my favorite quotes is, to break the rules, you must first master them.
Yeah, but Mark, but let me give you a different paradigm. So if you're on a busy street and that's the case, then your grandson needs to learn the boundaries, if you will, or you're going to hold his hand, right? But if you know that you got a kid that's full of energy and exploration and everything else, take him to a place where he can run free. If you grow up in urban America, then you're always going to be holding your grandson's hand, right? If you take him out to a field in the countryside, he can run free. And so they can learn both things. They can know,
right?
They can be free and explore in places where it's safe to explore.
Right.
It's all dependent on the circumstance, but the lesson shouldn't be you always have to stay next to Grandpa everywhere. Right?
Right.
That would be the wrong lesson. Only in certain places where it could cause injury.
Right. Death. Like, injury I'm fine with. Broken leg, broken bone. You know what? I'm fine with that.
Right.
But death, that's permanent, at least here on this side, is permanent here. So, yeah, Grandpa doesn't want you dying on his watch. And that's where...
treat kids like everywhere is an urban jungle, when the way they learn, the way they live, and maybe for the majority of the population it is. And there's all these boundaries that tell them, live under these rules, these circumstances, because it's safer and more predictable. And then there's no room to explore.
Right. If you're listening again to the rebroadcast, that's the benefit of the backstage passes. There's all kinds of these kind of conversations. Again, if you have any questions, connect with the individual who invited you to participate, or you can call toll-free 888-230-2300 or outside the U.S. 630-393-9909. And always remember, we can accomplish so much more together than we ever could on our own. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.